Jim and I should have probably compared notes. But the stories are pretty good. I think they're worth repeating. As you heard, my brother Jim, he's the oldest. By the way, I'm going to keep this in 4 minutes, so I'm going to work on that. And I think my brothers and sisters are probably on pins and needles because I don't have the greatest history when it comes to this kind of thing.
Turn into talking to the mic.
Okay. All right, so here we go. I'm going to use my road map here as a guide. Okay, I've got some different categories of titles. The first one is called Early Years. So you just heard from my brother Jim, who's the oldest of Sylvia and Donald's 6 children. My name is Lee, and I'm the youngest. I was commonly referred to as the baby of the family. My parents had 5 children in 10 years. Then, just as my mother thought she might have a sliver of peace when my brother Don began kindergarten, bingo, here comes number 6, Lee, 5 years after Don. The year was 1962, and Sylvia was just a few months shy of turning 46 years old. I've been told that back in 1962, this was a very risky situation. My dad was so relieved after I was born a healthy baby, he went out to play golf, and he had the lowest round of his life. I certainly think that is pretty neat. I'm also commonly referred to as a surprise, and I'm sure it must have been more than a surprise. I'm 50 years old now. I'm sure it was more like a shock. I can only imagine what Sylvia's life must have been like with 6 children with ages ranging from newborn to 15 years old. Even though we had a large family of 8 living in one house, I was very fortunate. I even had my own room as a baby. It was the closet next to my parents' bedroom. The surroundings weren't bad at all. It was me, the crib, and all of my mother's clothes. I'm also told that I was somewhat of an escape artist. Because I was able to find my way out of the crib, my parents ended up strapping me down to the mattress at night. Eventually, I was able to escape the straps, make a getaway from my room, the closet. Somehow, I'd managed my way down the staircase into one of my sister's bed, just in time to wet it. This is what my mother, Sylvia, was dealing with back then. 5 active children and a bedwetting escape artist infant. How could a mother possibly have any time of her own in this situation? When you're the youngest of 6 children, you also get to participate in experiments. When I was a young toddler, I was the subject of one of my brother Bob's experiments. The experiment was called, "Let's see what happens to Lee if I put some whiskey in his baby bottle." When the experiment was complete, I think I ended up in better shape than my brother Bob. So growing up is my next topic here. My father used to say that Sylvia raised the children, and I believe that to be accurate. My father had a very demanding schedule as a busy surgeon, serving his patients and providing a stable home for our family. My mother provided most of the individual attention that 6 active children require. My mother, Sylvia, somehow was able to accomplish the juggling act of managing 6 children, various activities and events, keeping up with the home and family meals, all while never knowing when my father would finally make it home from the hospital. She was able to accomplish all of this with plenty of energy and enthusiasm. I will always remember my mother's annual Halloween tradition. She had this very scary-looking mask with a long black hood. She would play very scary music and answer the door with a glass of red fruit punch in her hand, and she would ask the children who came to the house, "Would you like to drink some blood?" in a very deep, scary voice. If you tried that today, you could count on the police showing up at your door. Okay, now I'm going to move on to Sylvia's many wonderful traits. My mother, Sylvia, was not only a loving mother of 6, she was also an accomplished pianist who could play the piano by ear. Sylvia could hear a song played on the record player one time and then immediately repeat the song she had just heard. My mother passed along her love for music to my sister Carol, who also has passed on that torch to her daughter Colleen, who you just heard sing earlier today. By the way, Colleen just graduated from college in 3.5 years. You don't hear that very often these days. She is the 12th of Sylvia's 15 grandchildren to do so. So far, we're 12 for 12. Sylvia was the accompanist for a group of performers that called themselves the Mad Housewives Opera Company. The Mad Housewives were formed by a group of witty and talented wives of doctors who would perform their show to help raise money at various medical charity functions. I can still hear those songs being played in the back of my mind from all the rehearsals. So can my dad, I'm sure. She was also a skilled artist. My mother was a very good painter. She had painted many beautiful paintings that many of her children have in their homes. When I think about it, where did she find the time to produce these beautiful paintings with 6 children on her hands? But she did. She was always trying to better her talents. I remember her taking classes, painting classes, in her 60s. My mother was also an accomplished bridge player, as you heard my brother Jim tell you. Sylvia and my father enjoyed the game of bridge very much. They both played bridge for many years with their friends and family in Minnesota and in Arizona. Sylvia's brother Don Nelson and his wife Mariana also retired to Sun City, Arizona. And my mother's sisters Dorothy, along with her husband, were both categorized as life masters bridge players. The game of bridge was important pastime for my mother and father. We all feel so good about the 20 years of retirement they were able to spend sharing their time in Arizona with my mother's brother and sister, and also back home here in Minnesota. In fact, within this past year, Sylvia and my brother Don managed to finish first place in a bridge tournament not far from here. My brother Don would come over on Mondays to take my mother out to play bridge. Not bad at all for a 95-year-old woman. Next topic is golfers. My mother was an avid golfer, which is something that I'm particularly grateful of. I was fortunate as a young boy to be able to tag along with her on the golf course on Tuesday and Friday mornings during the summer while she played golf with her lady friends at the Minneapolis Golf Club, which, by the way, I think happens to be the happiest place on earth. Looking back, I think it was a nice alternative to a babysitter, or maybe it was just safer than leaving me at home with my brothers and sisters. Once in a while, I'd get my big chance to hit a shot on one of the par 3 holes. That was a big deal for me. My mother was the one who really got me started in golf. She would take me out to play 9 holes, just the 2 of us. In fact, I can clearly remember a special golf shot that I hit on the 7th hole at Minneapolis Golf Club with my mother. It was the first time I was able to reach the green from the top of the hill. It was just her and I can still remember hitting my red-colored Patty Berg 3-wood that day. In fact, I also remember my mother bringing me to a golf clinic there that was actually performed by the Patty Berg. And I was one of the lucky children that was chosen to hit a 6-iron off the first tee, and somehow I was able to get the ball up in the air and straight down the middle. Those of you who are golfers understand how some shots never leave your mind. As I grew older, I was able to join my father and mother on the golf course. I have very fond memories of being allowed to drive their golf cart as they played with another couple, as they did on Sunday afternoons. I was able also to share many rounds of golf with my parents while I lived in Arizona. Another thing, my mother wanted to make sure the grandchildren had a chance to enjoy the game of golf, and I heard a story recently. She signed many of them up for the golf clinic at the Minneapolis Golf Club, and she would have to be out there as a participant and watch them over. And I was told there were 5 or 6 kids swinging golf clubs, and I think somebody got hit in the head. And you don't hear about too many injuries involving blood on the golf course, but that took place. And during all this chaos, I'm told one of the grandchildren, my mother was in her mid-70s at the time, said, "Hey, Grandma, can you carry my bag?" Okay, this might go just a little over 4 minutes here. Next thing is encourager. My mother was quite the encourager. She strongly believed in the power of positive thinking. She was always reading self-help books and trying to encourage children to do the same. Her favorite book was titled How to Attract Good Luck, which is something she certainly accomplished. She used to give us great advice. She would often tell her children, never get too up or too down. Try to keep your life on an even keel. I'll always remember I was feeling a bit sorry for myself at the time, and my mother signed me up for the Dale Carnegie course. It didn't sound that appealing at the time, but looking back, I'm certain that it served me well. I know that there were some others she did the same thing for too. Okay, another trait, she was a reporter. You could call my mother a reporter. She would send out the family letter every few weeks, and she would also publish her annual grandmother story once a year. The family letter was a hand-typed written letter that was Xerox copied and sent to the entire family and more. Your name was added to the top of the letter, and all the recent news of the family on each family member was contained in the letter. I can remember thinking, I wonder if this person knew that this event that took place was going to be reported to the family. And the annual grandmother story was a project that was very important to my mother. Each child, and I believe the grandchildren too, received a 3-ring notebook once a year containing photos, letters, and remembrances from the prior year. I'll bet I have at least 30 of them at my home. Sylvia and Xerox were fast friends. Unselfish, the next title. My mother was an extremely unselfish person. She would never complain about my father's busy schedule. There were times when they would have company over for bridge and my dad would get called away to the hospital. There were some Christmas Eves that our father would have to leave the family, and we'd have to wait for him to return before opening the gifts. You can imagine how that went over with 6 children. My mother never complained about this. She would always say, nobody wants a pretty good surgeon. She had to always expect the unexpected. She was also very unfaithful about her own faith. My mother came from a Lutheran family and my father was Catholic. Back then, Catholics made it pretty clear that they wanted their children raised in the Catholic Church. While Sylvia did not convert to Catholicism, she would make sure that we all went to church on Sunday and she would sit with us throughout the service. When it came time to receive the Holy Communion, Sylvia would remain in the church pew as we all went up to the altar to receive communion. Much later in life, Sylvia attended a Bible study group with other ladies that she knew from the golf club. I think this was something new for her, and I know she enjoyed that very much. And I want to thank any of the ladies from that group, if they're here today, for sharing that experience with my mother. Okay, I think what my mother Sylvia will most be remembered for was that she was truly the master of the birthday greeting. I'm certain that many of us in this room today have received many birthday greetings from Sylvia. Will you please raise your hand if you've received a birthday greeting from Sylvia? That's just about everybody. I would constantly hear from my friends and people that I would come across. They would say, hey, I just received a birthday card from your mother. I even have a friend in Arizona who she only met once, who receives a birthday greeting from my mother every year. When I would visit my mother here at Covenant Village over the past 7 years, we would always stop by the mail room area on the way out so she could put an envelope that contained a greeting of some type in one of the other residents' mail slot. I have an email here from a neighbor. He was a neighbor of ours in Golden Valley. His name was Roger Bradfield. He used to wrote these beautiful children's books. He sent me this email last fall. He said, I was 88 this past week. I got a nice greeting from your mom. She is amazing. She has sent me greetings on my birthday ever since we moved from Minnesota in 1967. How old is she now? I think that says a lot right there. Okay. You know, I'm going to have to probably skip it by going to these. There's too many. But, the next one is cheerleader. We know that. You know, all the games, all the sporting events, all the plays. Generous is the next one. Why does that ever stand out? My parents were incredibly generous people, but they're also conservatively minded when it came to how they spent their hard-earned funds. We would play golf together on Sundays, and rather than eat dinner at the golf club, we would stop at Burger King on the way home for dinner. Any of the children, of her children or grandchildren who visited them in Arizona will remember going to Furr's Cafeteria on Sunday nights for dinner. If you were lucky, you may have had an evening snack later that evening that was wrapped in a napkin from Furr's Cafeteria. When it came time to go to college, there was never any limitations placed on where you could go. The sky was the limit. Education was extremely important to my parents, and they made sacrifices to ensure the opportunity was there for us. So in closing, I would like to thank God for allowing my brothers and sisters and I to have such incredible parents who came from our country's greatest generation. They lived through the Depression, and they made it on their own. My mother lost her father at age 52. My dad had lost his father at age 16 to a long illness. That is what inspired my dad to become a surgeon. He and his mother sold their family's ranch in Montana so he could attend medical school here in Minnesota. I beam with proudness when I tell you here that five of my parents' 6 children have postgraduate degrees. They range from masters in business, masters in education, 2 Juris Doctorates, and a PhD. I am the lone exception here. I couldn't find a master's in golf. But I did find a wonderful place to work where I was able to learn very important life lessons from some incredible people. By the way, you can also have the titles JD, MBA, MD to Sylvia's and Donald's grandchildren as of today. The next title I have is called Legacy. My parents embarked on an amazing project many years ago. I'm going to name it A Gateway to Success. This project began around 1960 at the Good Shepherd School here in Golden Valley. The project won't be complete until around the year 2026, when the last of Sylvia and Donald's 15 grandchildren graduate from college. As you can see, this project will take 66 years to complete. Not only did Sylvia and Donald provide a loving, supporting home where they led by example, they have provided the means for their 6 children and their 15 grandchildren to attend college. May I ask that all the people in this room who have received financial support from Sylvia and Donald to please stand up. This is Sylvia and Donald's legacy. As we stand here today, Sylvia and Donald are 18 for 18 when it comes to college educations completed. Number 19 starts next fall, and 21 and 22 are in training. You can please sit down. So this represents what 2 people who lived through the Great Depression and came from the greatest generation can do for others. I look forward to the day when my parents can call a blackjack on 21. I know my father and mother will be looking down from heaven with great pride. The final chapter. So finally closes the chapter on the end of an era for the Nelson family. My mother Sylvia was the oldest of 5 Nelson children, and she was the oldest, and she was the longest to survive. She had 3 younger sisters named Dorothy, Mary, and Marjorie. She also had a brother named Don, who I always called my favorite uncle. I just realized this morning that he was my only uncle, and he certainly was my favorite uncle. My father's sister Catherine is still living in Washington at an age very close to my mother's, around 96. So, well, we made it to the 18th green of life. My mother just hit the final putt. What do you think happened? We all know Sylvia made a birdie.